The state in which Watt found himself resisted formulation in a way no state had ever done in which Watt had ever found himself, and Watt had found himself in a great many states in his day. Looking at a pot, for example, or thinking of a pot, at one of Mr. Knott's pots, of one of Mr. Knott's pots. It was in vain that Watt said, pot, pot. Well, perhaps not quite in vain, but very nearly. For it was not a pot. The more he looked, the more he reflected, the more he felt sure of that it was not a pot at all. It resembled a pot. It was almost a pot. But it was not a pot of which one could say, pot, pot, and be comforted. It was in vain that it answered with unexceptionable adequacy all the purposes and performed all the offices of a pot. It was not a pot. And it was just this hair-breadth departure from the nature of a true pot that so excruciated Watt. For if the approximation had been less close, then Watt would have been less anguished. For then he would not have said, "This is a pot, and yet not a pot." No, but then he would have said, "This is something of which I do not know the name." And Watt preferred, on the whole, having to do with things of which he did not know the name, though this too was painful to Watt, to having to do with things of which the known name, the proven name, was not the name any more for him. For he could always hope of a thing of which he had never known the name, that he would learn the name some day, and so be tranquilized. But he could not look forward to this in the case of a thing of which the true name had ceased, suddenly or gradually, to be the true name for Watt. For the pot remained a pot. Watt felt sure of that, for everyone but Watt. For Watt alone, it was not a pot any more. Then, when he turned for reassurance to himself, who was not Mr. Knott's, in the sense that the pot was, who had come from without, and whom the without would take again, he made the distressing discovery that of himself too he could no longer affirm anything that did not seem as false as if he had affirmed it of a stone.